just got off with Mindy Jensen. Dane, I had a blast on that podcast. So what are some of the highlights?
Man, we learned all about waitressing. We learned in real talk, we learned that everyday people can do great things and end up in a place that you probably wouldn't believe. All you got to do is work hard and educate yourself. So that was a really fun
I think at
episode.
the beginning of the story it was shocking because, we start off with, her, probably the first half of the episode was just about her youth and how she was not aimlessly drifting, but she was a normal person, right? Didn't think about money until a certain point in her life. Yeah. And she was a waitress and she got a degree.
And in fashion design as well.
Yeah. And then towards the end, we find out that she can literally spend $160,000 a year every year forever until she dies, and probably die with more money than she has right now, which is like 13,000.
It blew my mind.
13, and she gives you tips at the end. She's actually all throughout it. She's giving you direct tips you can immediately take and follow into action immediately. So that's huge.
Yeah. And I would consider Mindy really a finance veteran at this point. Such great actionable steps. Something you don't want to miss out on, for sure.
We're going to jump right into it right now. What's up, guys? It's Hugh and Dane here on the FU Money Podcast. FU, Dane.
FU, Hugh.
And today we're at... Can't say that. Anyways, we are joined with a guest, and I'm super excited. She's a great friend of mine. We have, it says on my script here, I'm supposed to say mind-blowing fact 1, mind-blowing fact 2. I'm going to give 3. 1, she was a waitress. Then she went to school to study fashion design, which is a great choice for all the parents out there.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, excellent choice. Don't stop listening. There's more.
And now she here sits a $4 millionaire. So there's something that drastically changed from her life, and it is not because of fashion or waiting tables. And it is. We're joined by Mindy Jensen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Hugh and Dane. I am super excited. And yes, for all of you out there thinking about studying fashion design, take a big look inside and see if it actually means something to you first before you spend all of your parents' college fund on a degree that you will never, ever, ever use.
That's fair. I thought maybe you made $4 million because you're the greatest waitress in the world. I was like, that's impressive. I was like, holy
I'm a pretty
cow.
awesome waitress, but that is not where zero of my net worth came from waitressing.
Well, and today we hope to uncover kind of, how Mindy went from, hey, I'm a normal person. Actually, maybe less than normal, taking fashion design for no reason in college. And how you started life off as an adult, maybe not in such a great place, and now how you are in such an awesome place and how it's a repeatable story that normal people can reach. So that's kind of the goal here. And for those of you that know about Mindy's, but doesn't know about, know about me, but don't know about Mindy, I'm shocked. She's on Bigger Pockets Money podcast and her own podcast, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but tons of facts there.
Yeah, welcome, Mindy. It's actually
Thank
really
you.
exciting to have you on. I actually kind of like mind-blowing fact number 1. I don't even know if Hugh knows this. I was a server until my late 20s, actually until I was 30. Never had any investment vehicles, didn't know anything about finance. It was the way I was just making cash to pay the bills. So I also spent a remarkable amount of time, longer than I should have, in restaurants.
You can make a lot of money as a server, a bartender, the tipped industry in general. For anybody who is listening who works in the tipped industry, Barbara Sloan has a book called Tipped, The Life-Changing Guide to Financial Freedom for Waitresses, Bartenders, Strippers, and All Service. And then it cuts off, thanks Amazon, and all other service industry professionals. And it's a really awesome book about how you can grow wealth even if you don't have a traditional W-2 job, you don't have access to a 401k, all of the stuff that other, how do I say this without sounding like such a snob? All the stuff that other more traditional jobs have access to. As a tipped employee, you don't really have access to that. And she's like, that's okay. It doesn't matter. You can still become a bajillionaire just like me.
Well, I
So
would have
that is an
loved to have
awesome
that
book.
book. Yeah,
I was like, where were you 20 years ago when
I
I was
know.
waiting tables? Barbara,
Yeah,
thanks.
man.
Yeah.
Well, and it
So
just goes
yes,
to
I
show.
was a waitress.
Oh, okay, nice. And what part of
Sorry,
your
go
life,
ahead.
like 20s or in what age group were you doing that?
Oh, I started waiting tables probably when I was 18 or 19. It was a great way to generate some extra income and not really have to. I mean, at the time, I wasn't really worried about money because if I spent all my money today, I could just go pick up a shift tomorrow. You can always pick up a shift for somebody. I can go pick up a shift tomorrow and then make it all back. And then I have money for gas or food or whatever. It was super easy to live day to day and not worry about it because I was mostly living with my parents when I was doing it. So I didn't have a rent payment. And even if I did have a rent payment, it's, 3, 4 shifts and I've covered my rent. And then I've got either the rest of the month off or I can do more shifts and, save up a little for, oh, I've got a vacation next month. I got to figure out how to pay for it, pick up a couple of shifts. Like I said, somebody is always looking to get rid of their shift.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
actually, David Green, the host of the real estate, the Bigger Pockets Money real, David Green, the host of the Bigger Pockets Real Estate podcast, is a former waiter as well. And
Oh,
he
wow.
said he had some really great tips on episode 12 of the Bigger Pockets Money podcast about how you can increase your tips during your shift just by coming in early and, picking up those last couple of tables that the departing waitresses and server staff, I should say, because I'm so used to calling it waitresses, but there's waiters too.
Well,
The departing serving staff doesn't want to sit there for like one more table. You're like, I'll take that because you got to be there anyway. What's a big deal starting a half an hour early? And then you volunteer to close if you're not scheduled to close. And there's like all these different things. You're already there. Why not make an extra $50, $100, $200 by tacking on a couple of minutes at the beginning and end?
Yeah, that's a fantastic episode. Because I think in there he also gives tips about like how to have your boss, who everyone didn't like you a lot, and then you became the go-to guy, and then and or gal, right? And I think he
Yeah.
made a killing. And yeah,
He did.
Yeah.
And it was just little stuff. He asked her, what is something that, like, what's a pain point of yours? And she said, I hate that there are spots on the wine glasses. He's like, I made it my mission to be cleaning wine glasses visibly every time she walked in after she told me that. And now, not only is he her favorite and he's like the only one that she likes because everybody else is grumbling about how much their job sucks, he gets not necessarily special treatment, but when you request a day off that everybody else is requesting off, of course, you're going to get it before your coworker who is always complaining and always asking to be cut early and coming in late and yada, yada, yada. Here you've got this bedrock of a guy and he wants one day off. Of course, you're going to give it to him. And, that's really important when you're a tipped waitress, a tipped employee, and it's, Christmas time or, time when everybody wants time
well,
off.
I think a lot that
Yeah.
we're talking about right now is mindset and fundamentals, right? Here you guys were, it doesn't matter what your starting point was. Here you guys are all extremely successful. And and part of the reason I love having you on the show, especially so early on, is for people who have never listened or this may be their first introduction to financial independence. You can start from anywhere, which in generally the United States, you're going to be considered a disadvantaged spot. Or if you're younger, that's almost a superpower. So, I mean, that's kind of on the early life. Let's go back a little bit. Did you grow up talking about money? And if so, was it evil in your household, or was it good, or did you guys not talk about it? How did that all work?
We didn't talk about it. My earliest money memory was going to garage sales. This is, you got to remember, I'm very old, so this is pre-internet. My dad every Saturday morning would get out the Saturday newspaper where they had the classifieds where all the garage sales were listed and circle all the ones that he wanted to go to. And then he'd spread out the map of the city and he would make the most advantageous route to get us from our house to either the garage sales that had the tools that he was looking to pick up, or the garage sales that had like whatever, depending on which direction he wanted to go, he could make this like big map. And that was every Saturday. And I didn't know that that wasn't what everybody did on Saturday mornings, because there's other people at garage sales too. I didn't know that people didn't do that until 8th grade. We had moved from California to Illinois, and I went into school, and I had found a pair of jeans, but they had a little hole in them. So my mother sewed a little applique on top of it. And somebody looked at me, she's like, why do your jeans have bees on them? I'm like, oh, there was a hole. Like, do you know how awful that is in public school to admit that your jeans had holes in them to like the popular kid? Oh my goodness. So yeah, that's some of my first money memories. Another one is my dad like chastising me for wanting to buy this like giant pencil at a garage sale for 15 cents. And then later on, we were buying something for Mother's Day or something. He's like, see, if you would have spent that 15 cents on that pencil, then you would not have enough money for your Mother's Day present. And I'm like, at the time I was like, oh, I feel so bad. But now looking back on it, I'm like, you had money, you had a quarter. Like,
So
why couldn't you
scarcity
help me out
mindset.
with
So it
this?
sounded like you had a scarcity mindset upbringing.
Oh, absolutely scarcity mindset. So my dad is one of 7 and my mom's one of 8. I am related to everybody in Southern Illinois and Eastern Indiana. And hi all, by the way. Hi cousins and aunts and uncles. But it was they didn't have anything. They, growing up with that many mouths to feed, their parents were blue collar workers, and that doesn't generate a lot of income in the 40s, 50s, 60s like it does now. And that was, a lot of mouths to feed and not a lot of money coming in. They didn't waste anything, just like we didn't waste anything. And why would you pay full price or even buy it new when you could buy it used or, get it for a discount? It's just got a little hole in it.
I love that
So yeah,
story.
definitely growing up with a scarcity mindset.
Well, and you mentioned something interesting, because later people paid to have holes put in their jeans. That became a thing too when I was
Right?
growing up. The world makes no sense sometimes, but love that story.
I was a trendsetter.
That's great. Well, and I'm curious on that same note. So coming kind of from that scarcity mindset, was it hard for you to feel okay? And maybe some people go down the road of giving themselves permission, or we run into roadblocks, right? Mentally, like, am I okay to make this kind of money? Am I okay to be a wealthy person? Like, did that ever affect you and your career path?
Tell me you haven't listened to episode 108 of the I Will Teach You to Be Rich podcast without telling me you haven't listened to episode 108 of the I Will Teach You to Be Rich podcast. My husband and I went on Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich podcast, episode 108, where we thought we were going to get some tips on how to like loosen up the purse strings. And it was a very uncomfortable conversation with him being like, yeah, do you think you're cheap? I'm like, whoa, that's the first question you're asking me? I thought we were going to be like, hey, how's it
Do you
going?
think you're cheap is
And
what
he's
he
like,
said?
"So
I haven't listened to
do
it.
you think you're cheap? And I was like, what? Okay, so you want to watch me squirm, go listen to that podcast, because that was, we actually recorded for 3 hours with him, and he cut it down to about an hour and a half. So it's a long listen, but long story short, yes, I have never identified with my net worth. I still don't. It's like, I am Mindy, and there is this bank account with my name on it that has more money than I can ever spend. And those are two very different
Not with that
things,
attitude.
even though, well,
Yeah.
we're getting better, but we still have difficulty spending. We're looking to donations and charities and like giving to be able to spend some of this money, because like honestly, my day-to-day life is pretty good. I don't not have everything that I need. I don't want a lot of things, but yeah, there's definitely still scarcity.
You know, it's
mindset.
really interesting. Going back to you're talking about your father growing up, and so my father was born in 1929, and I have a very older mindset.
That's right.
And my dad grew up during the Great Depression and pre-World War II. I think he's older than he might be older than AC/DC electricity. I can't remember, or right around the time. He's definitely older than PVC, like the substance in our houses, right, for plumbing. And it's kind of crazy stuff. So when you're talking about the scarcity mindset, and then my mom is from Taiwan, third world country at the time in the 50s, and was very poor until the 80s. And so growing up, we had a definite scarcity mindset. I think it's an immigrant mindset. And I noticed something interesting is a lot of people who are self-made carry that with them, but at the same time, people that grow up without money, like I've had a few friends and some girlfriends in the past. When their parents were young, they had no money, and so now it's a status thing to only buy the name brand thing, and own like, oh, I'm buying the real Skittles. I'm not buying the fake Skittles. You know, and I think that's, I don't know where people get that from, what the difference is, because, here I am, I grew up on the wealthy side of the spectrum. I didn't know any better. We saved everything and we always bought the cheapest, but as a kid, I would have never known that because we always bought the most inexpensive thing we possibly could.
Yes. Yes. I remember my dad, he likes to have a beer with dinner. And I remember at one point he was buying these cans that literally had stencil on it beer. It was like generic beer. What's the point of buying generic beer when name brand beer can sometimes taste so bad?
Yeah.
Like, why would you go even worse? But yeah, we always bought the lowest and the least. And my parents came from a scarcity mindset. And then in 1979, my dad lost his job. We moved from Arizona to Oregon, and it's so long ago I can't even remember, but something about his boss was caught embezzling funds or something from the company, and at the time their policy was, if we're going to fire this guy, we're going to fire everybody below him.
Whoa.
So he got caught up in this like, it's not his fault sort of thing. At the same time, we had bought a house because we were going to live up there, and you couldn't sell anything. Because you couldn't lock in an interest rate back in the 70s. 14% interest our buyers for this property had alone. And then by the time closing came, rates were up to 17%. So all of you people complaining about 7%, let me take you back to the 70s.
Oh my gosh.
Holy cow.
But yeah, so they had to cancel the contract, and then we were stuck with this unsellable house while my dad doesn't have a job. And he did eventually get a job. We moved again. I have moved everywhere. People always ask me if I'm a military brat. No, I'm a corporate brat. I think I'm in my 29th or 30th house. After a while, you just stop counting. But he was able to get a job again. And I think that combined with his, childhood and growing up, I think that combined to make him be like, I am going to hoard all of this money. So I still don't see them spending a lot of money even today.
You bring up a really interesting topic because a lot of this podcast and our intention is to not just push frugality by any means, but really talk about intelligent money strategies and how to live with that balance. Like, be someone who knows what to do, what vehicles you use, learn from the people who are smarter than all of us, but then at the same time, you have to live. So you're saying that, and this seems to be a repeating pattern with so many people, especially in some of the older generations, where they just hold on. And they're just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm holding on. We care for an elderly gentleman. He's almost 80 now. He's got like 60 grand in his checking account. And his cable went up $18, and he didn't know what it was from. And he was losing his mind one day. I was like, Garrett, I'm pretty sure it's cable. There's some weird stuff going on. And he was like, this is too much. He thought he was going broke tomorrow. And it was just such a crazy thing to watch him panic. And I'm like, I think you'll be okay. You got a reserve, pretty healthy reserve for yourself, but it's wild.
Yeah. If he's 80 years old, he's born, in the 40s? And that's right when you had the war. Right? That was the war?
Mm-hmm. World War II?
The
war!
As soon as I said that, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. But it is. Yeah, you had the war, and there was, scarcity mindset and rationing and, make sure there's enough stuff for the troops and yada, yada. So your early childhood experiences really cement your relationship with money throughout your whole life. And Hugh, to your point, there's kind of two responses to the I didn't grow up with anything mentality. Either you continue to hoard money and hoard everything and spend very little because you're afraid that you could someday lose your job or whatever. And there's the, well, I didn't have it when I was young, so now I'm going to buy it and I deserve it because I put in my time earlier. If you can't afford it comfortably, you don't deserve it.
Right. And for that, on the mindset shift, kind of, in the FIRE community, the financial independent retire early folks, there's a lot of people have this super duper frugal mindset, and Dane and I are effectively financially independent. I don't want to say we didn't sacrifice, but I want to say we didn't take it to the extreme, eating rice and beans. We enjoyed ourselves for the most part. I met Dane 10 years ago now, and when I was a young 20-something, and we were drinking and going out and doing the normal thing, but we still had a little bit of just a tiny bit of being slightly responsible with that, and we just didn't blow everything we had, and I think that led to it. So, what was your pivot point, Mindy, that caused you? Was there a moment that I can't believe this is it? What was that for you? Why did you start caring about money?
Oh, I started caring about money probably after I got married. My husband was super rich.
And this is
he
Coupon
was
Carl with a
making
K, right?
$40,000 a year. Coupon Carl. He was making $40,000 a year, and I was like, "Oh my God, he's so rich!" Because I was making $24,000 a year at the time, from one job, and then of course I always had a second job because waitressing, and then that's like almost free money. You're getting social interaction with your friends at work while also making money, and then you go out afterwards and you have a couple of beers with them, and you really start to bond with your coworkers. And it's like waiting tables can be really fun because you've got other people there with you doing the same thing. Waiting tables can be kind of a soul crushing experience too, when you get that one nasty table that really just berates you for everything and blah, blah, blah. But then you just go in the back and talk to your friends and be like, "Oh my God, can you believe this table? Check them out. This is what they said." And then you kind of get over it. But that's free money because you've got the social experience on the same time you're making money. I don't know. I didn't really think of it that way. I just thought I got all this money. I could do whatever I want. I didn't really start thinking about it until we got married. He had $60,000 in student loans. He proposed a prenup. And I was like, "We don't have anything. I have a condo that's worth $50,000 and you have a house that's worth $100,000. We're pretty even." And it turns out I was actually wealthier than he was because I didn't have any debt and he had $60,000.
So he was negative 60,000 and you were zero.
Yes, I should have gotten a prenup. I actually, although we're never getting a divorce, so it doesn't matter. But there's this book called The Prenup Prescription that my friend Erin Thomas wrote. And this book changed my thinking about prenups because it's not a recipe for a divorce. Anybody listening, you have a prenup. Even if you don't have a real prenup, you still have a prenup. It's the divorce laws in your state. So if you don't want somebody dictating how your assets are going to be split up and you're not married, you should get a prenup. If you're already married, maybe you should consider a postnup. But anyway, he brought this up and I was like, why would we need one? Then we started looking and we kind of did need one because I was so much richer than he was. So he married a sugar mama, lucky for him, Coupon Carl. And then he started making a lot more money. He was a computer programmer and I was an administrative assistant, and I got a whopping raise. Now I'm making $30,000 a year, but he's making 75 now, and we were spending 30. My 30 went to fund our 401ks, and we would spend half of his paycheck, and the other half of his paycheck we just saved, and we started investing in stocks because that's what you're supposed to do. And we bought. He's in the tech industry. He started looking at tech stocks. I'm he was having this problem at work. He's like, "Man, I got to go through this big coding book to figure out how to do this thing." And his coworker next to him was like, oh, just Google it. And this is way back before Google was a verb. Just Google it. He's like, what are you talking about? He said, go to google.com and type in your question. He's like, what? This is what, like, there was no such thing as search engines. They had the garbage search engines.
Ask Jeeves.
So he Ask Jeeves,
Dump
Yahoo.
pile.
Like, it used to be a search engine. It was awful. So he types in his question and the answer is instantly there. He's like, I just saved hours of research time with this one thing. Now, if it was me, I would have been like, hey, that's cool, and move on to the next thing. And he's like, I have to research this. So he started researching it and he discovered that they were going to go public. So the way they went public was called a Dutch auction. And I don't know the actual specifics, but he was able to get in on the IPO. And I don't know if you follow investing news, you can't get in on the IPO unless you know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. So the fact that regular people could get in on the Google IPO was fabulous. And he bought some Google stock, and that has turned into, I think it's 100 times what we bought it for. That investment. It's just crazy. And now that I say that, people are going to be like, no, Carl said it was only 80 times or whatever. So I'm sorry if I got the actual number, but it has grown exponentially since we bought it. And anybody can buy a stock. I don't recommend buying individual
Right, he got
stocks
lucky.
if you, yeah,
He made an
absolutely
asymmetric
got
bet,
lucky.
right? Because I think at the time there was Google and Netscape and AOL and these big juggernaut, right? Google was going up against AOL. Now we laugh, but AOL back then
Yes.
was massive. Yeah, so he could have just as easily locked
Right.
everything.
And he did that a couple of times with different bets that we were making while we were investing in our 401k and we were contributing to our Roth IRAs and, you know, doing all the things you're supposed to do. He was also doing this on the side. He was making small, I don't like the word bet, but small investments in these companies that he had done research into. They kept popping up in the news, but in a good way. And he's like, I'm going to take a small amount of money, small enough that if it goes to zero tomorrow, I'm going to be bummed that I lost money, but it's not going to affect my life. And those investments have grown over, 20 something years that now we are a 4 millionaire. I think it's closer to 5,
Whoa.
but don't quote me.
So you don't have
And
to
it's
wait
closer to
tables
5 because it
anymore.
grows. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I don't have to wait tables anymore. I could if I wanted to. I don't want to.
So you
Yeah.
really,
It's
it was
a lot
you
of work.
starting off with the getting married, but how did you make the transition to you're Mindy Jensen, right? You're so interested in you teach a lot of people about money. You're on money podcasts. You don't recommend any of those things that you actually experienced and went through now. What was the what kind of led up to all that?
Well, so I mentioned that I had a $50,000 condo and he had a $100,000 house. And when we got married, I sold my condo. I don't love owning condos. Every condo that I've ever owned has had a special assessment. Like the day after I closed, they announced a special assessment. It's kind of a knack that I have to buy terribly run condos. So I wanted to sell it. He had a house, and in my mind, that was better. So I put my house on the market before we were getting married, and I ended up selling it for $75,000. I was like, I just made my entire salary by buying a place to live, making it nicer because I couldn't afford something nice. So I had to buy like the dumpy place and, fix it up. And then I sold it. And I'm paying no capital gains taxes thanks to the Section 121 exclusion in the IRS code. Says that you don't pay any tax on the gain of your property up to $250,000 if you're single, it's actually $250,000 per person on title. So if all three of us were on title, that would be no gain on $750,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I
So
saw
you don't have to be married.
Natalie Colity told me that.
It's just people on title, so long as you live there.
It's as long as it is your primary residence and you live in there and own it for 2 of the last 5 years. And those don't have to be concurrent years. So I sold it and paid no capital gains taxes. I'm like, I like that a whole lot because on that 24K that I was making at my job, I was paying taxes on that too. So then we move into his house. We fixed it up, sold it after 2 years, and made $100,000 and paid $0 in taxes again. And we kept doing that. We're in our 10th live in flip. That's called live in flipping, where you buy an ugly house and make it pretty while you live in it, and then you move. You don't have to move, but that's what we did, which contributed to my now I'm in 30 different houses thing. But yeah, we took that money and we would put it into the stock market, a little bit for the next down payment, but then we would put that in the stock market, and that grew. And, if the stock market scares you, there's this thing called index funds. And you can buy essentially a mutual fund made out of every stock that is on that particular index. The S&P 500, actually I should look up these. What are the indexes in the stock market? Let's see. We've got the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ Composite, the NASDAQ 100. There's all these different indexes, and you don't have to know what you're doing. You just have to put money in there. And the prevailing thought is a rising tide lifts all ships. So if 47 stocks are in there, and there's not, it's like hundreds and hundreds, but 47 stocks are in there, and 40 of them are doing well and 7 of them are doing terribly, it's not the 7 that are terrible aren't going to drag that down unless except in extenuating circumstances like oh God, what was the name of that? Enron. Like Enron. They went to zero.
Yeah.
That probably had a more than a little blip on the index that they were in. But it's a great way to start investing in the stock market while you're teaching yourself about just individual stocks if you want, or you don't have to learn anything about it. Just put money in the index fund. Sorry, that was a lot.
And I actually love that small pro tip because, again, this is just people really kind of whetting their understanding of what some of these investment vehicles are, what an index fund is. If you were like me, I am not a stock genius. That is like my vehicle. Put it where other people know what they're doing and companies all rise together. So I'm really glad you touched on that.
Yeah, and I got that tip from my friend J.L. Collins. This book, The Simple Path to Wealth, is an awesome book on stock market investing in general, but definitely about index funds. He wrote it to his then 17-year-old daughter who said, Dad, I know I'm supposed to know about this stuff. I just don't want to listen. So he's like, fine, I'll give all this information to you in a way that you can understand it. So it's not filled with jargon. Any jargon in there is easily explained. It's written for a 17-year-old to understand. So if you are starting from scratch, that's okay. You can still read and understand
That
the book.
I love that book because I think he talks about it in like beer drinking terms. It's like, oh, you pour yourself a beer, but there's all this foam, and you don't actually get that beer. And it's super digestible for me to even understand. And I think I was like, oh well, I can understand this book.
I mean, if Hugh can understand it,
that was my whole point.
Then it's good. Yeah,
if I could
he could understand it drunk. But I'm about to give that book to my son. We just took him and opened his first Roth IRA account. He's 15, and we're all the money that we pay vendors to do our landscaping for a lot of our properties, he does, and now we're going to start paying him and just taking advantage of some of those great tools that are out there that people just don't know about. And that Simple Path to Wealth was the first thing that popped in my mind. I think he's ready. So great book.
Yeah, there's also Scott Trench's book, Set for Life. That's more for early 20s. But that's a great kind of primer for how to become financially independent. First of all, get an emergency fund. Give yourself space to, be flexible in your decisions. And I think that that's something that isn't touched on enough. The emergency fund will help you if you lose your job. It helps you take risks so that if the risk doesn't pay off, you still have something to fall back on. But if you're paycheck to paycheck and, frugality really gets you far. It's like the younger you are, when you can learn to live on slightly less, and you save the rest, or actually it's called pay yourself first, where I am going to invest $100 a week. Then take that money and instantly put it into your investments every week and then spend. Don't spend and hope that you have $100 left over to put in the account. So that takes a little bit of discipline, but it takes a little bit of discipline to become financially independent.
Yeah, I think one big thing that we're really getting at first off, if you're a young person listening to this for some reason, one, good on you. Like and subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. But on a serious note, you have the unfair advantage of having decades on all three of us on this call. Your son, if he were listening, would have the ability to eclipse us by the time they're our same age, just because of time. Time in the market's more important than timing the market.
Yeah.
And so, Mindy, if you were listening to this and you're brand new, where would you start? If you were, I don't know, maybe, you're a normal person, you didn't have the education, right? You didn't start thinking about money until you were married. Know really a lot. Where would you start in your journey of okay,
or
I'm
where would
waking up.
Mindy the server start? That's a good question if you were
Right.
to do it differently.
If Mindy the server was right here, right now, I would find that book, Tipped by Barbara Sloan, Sloan. It's on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I would find that book and I would read it. She has some really great tips in that book for how you can handle your finances. I would stop listening to all the people around you who are paycheck to paycheck and telling you can't do it, who are not there to motivate you to continue. And I would definitely not listen to Barb, not Barb, because that's Barbara Sloan, Marge, who has a really awesome get rich quick idea. No, she doesn't. She has a lose all your money quick idea. So I would start with the basics. Educate yourself. There's so much information on the internet. When I was waiting tables, the internet didn't even exist. I mean, I guess technically it did. Didn't Al Gore invent it in the 60s or whatever that thing is? But it was not in the iteration that you find right now. You have all this information at your fingertips. Literally, you can go and start learning about things. If I was 20 and waiting tables, I would try really hard to open up a Roth IRA and max it out. And that's going to be easy to do when you've got this, free money. Like I said, listen to episode 12 of the Bigger Pockets Money podcast if you're a tipped employee, and get the tips from David Green. They're really, really actionable and super easy to do. All of this money stuff isn't hard, but it takes some dedication. Everybody wants to be a millionaire, but nobody wants to do the work to be a millionaire. So know that you're going to have to do a little bit of work, and pick up a copy of The Simple Path to Wealth because it's awesome. Also, get a real estate license. Are you guys agents, both of you?
No, actually.
Oh, I thought that was what your
That's what I'm
name
saying. We
tag
don't
said or
do
whatever.
anything. I don't know why.
No, we just buy a lot. We don't sell anything.
Okay, so become
Yeah.
a real estate agent because you can make some big money selling houses.
Now, Mindy,
Yeah.
what's the average
House
price
hack.
of a house there? Where your market?
$600,000.
And so-
$600,000. 12 years ago, it was like 300.
In our market, our mean average is 180,000, and the houses we're buying is like $50,000 to $80,000 houses, which is why it never made sense. Not that we didn't. I mean, it'd be useful, but that's the main reason I didn't pursue it.
Okay. That's a good point. If the median price of the house that the houses in your market that are selling are way low, you're not going to make a lot of money. In that case, become a landlord. House hack. What are you renting those $58,000 houses for?
Those are going to be like $58,000. Let's say we're all in for 70 grand at the end. We're probably renting them for $950. So we're like 100. We're like 1.2 to 1.5% rule sometimes.
Wow. I get 0.5 or 0.6 if I am super lucky.
Midwest. Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's definitely
Well,
repeatable.
and things have changed. I would say our medium house price has actually gone up closer to 250 to 300, and it's just because there's a lot of immigration here from outside states and the coast. But still, now would be a good time to consider. Hugh and I have talked about it, getting licenses, because you're right. There's just money on the table that we're paying other people to close these houses and write contracts, which we know how to do.
And you had recommended this
Yeah.
for just the average Joe, right? I'm someone working a W-2 somewhere, and you had recommended getting your real estate license to what? To replace your income, to be an addition? What were you thinking with that?
It could be either. You don't have to be a full-time real estate agent, but having the ability to get into houses and see them as soon as they come up. You have access to the MLS, which you can only get if you're a real estate agent or in a field adjacent, like an appraiser or a home inspector. They sometimes can have adjacent access, but having access to the MLS, being able to look up comps and see what things are selling for. You can start finding deals for yourself. You can do this live-in flipping thing that I've been doing where you move into a house, live there for 2 years, fix it up. You can eliminate your house cost altogether by house hacking, which is also called having roommates.
Which you're
Or
probably having
buying
anyways at that age.
Yeah, you should be having roommates at that age. There is nothing that says you have to be living by yourself. I deserve to have my own property. No, you don't. You can have a roommate and spend, like, why would you spend $1,200 on your mortgage, $2,000 on your mortgage, when you could spend zero because you have a couple of roommates?
Yeah, that's
So,
really well
yeah.
said. And one thing I want to really stress to any listeners is the idea is we weren't all born into really smart, wealthy families that had this all mapped out for us. And it all just came, that was in my mind, what really somehow rich kids had over everyday kids like any of us was somehow they had it all figured out. All the systems were built out for them and they just stepped into it. And I wasn't part of that. And so I just didn't know what they would know. And I had a sense that I would struggle early on. And I think it was just, again, a mental attitude and admitting that, like, you know, those, like all of us, we have access to these things. You have access to Google. You have access to great podcasts, to books. It's not just working hard. You have to educate yourself. And that's what the smart and wealthy do. And once that clicked for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 100% capable of doing this. I don't know why I didn't know that before, but I love that we've worked in service industries. Hugh really had to scrape and work his way through his life as he learned about finances and wealth, because his parents didn't just flaunt it and just give him everything, which was, again, a really cool lesson where we had to educate and work hard to get where we're at.
Well, I'll take it a step further. So my parent, by the time I don't know, realized it, my parents were like multimillionaires across, like, owning companies across, the United States and China and all kinds of stuff like that. Growing up, you had to have no idea. And I can say that I probably know far more about money and finances and the way it works, far more than they know, only because of Bigger Pockets and the free resources that I learned everything from. And they taught me roughly for free, or maybe it was all cumulatively the books behind me cost more than the actual audiobooks. I have those for this set because I don't read. But literally, all this is free, and it starts with just educating yourself. And the earlier you do, the better. Like you said, so many, rich kids, if you will, you can classify me as that, and we grew up not knowing that. I'm the youngest of 12, and I'm going to say one, mainly because a lot of people aren't going to be, most of my siblings are not going to be listening to this. Most of them are garbage with their money, and they're completely bankrupt as they are, and they're below or super negative. They're your standard. We grew up not knowing any better because it was never talked about. Money was never talked about. No education went on. And that's the one difference that I talk about money all the time with everyone because it's so taboo. And I think, it's important to talk about and educate yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
I did not know
and-
you were one of 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My father said he's irresponsible. So he said, oh, yeah, I was careless.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Such a great story. But yeah, and I want to take a second to maybe fast forward to Mindy Jensen now. And my biggest question is, now that you know a little bit about money, you've been in the field, you've educated yourself, you've worked hard. What is one of your favorite or best wealth building vehicles that you use currently?
Wealth building vehicles is equal parts the stock market and my primary residence, which is not always an investment. So if you buy a beautiful house, you're paying retail rates for it. I am buying smoke infested dog properties that nobody else wants. They've been sitting on the market for a long time. I walk through them. The house that I'm in right now, I walked through. I spent like 30 or 45 minutes here. I had to go home and take a shower because the smoke was so thick in here. It's like seeped into my clothes and it seeped into my skin. And this was after the former occupants had passed away and they had painted the walls. They didn't clean the carpets, of course. And it had been sitting vacant it was on market for 3 months, and it had been sitting vacant before that for, I think, another 4 months. So I can't imagine what this house smelled like. It didn't occur to anybody to open a window in this house, which bode well for me because I was able to snatch this up at a bargain. So get a little uncomfortable, and that's how you're going to generate wealth, by getting uncomfortable.
So it smelled like money, is what you're saying.
Yes, it smelled like money that was lit on fire. It was so gross in here. But we used an ozone machine. I could have hired somebody to come in for an ozone company to come in and do, like, I think the whole house would have been like $1,000. I bought an $80 ozone machine on Amazon, and I just moved it room to room to room. And the master bathroom took like 4 times to ozone out. I guess that was their favorite place to smoke. Ugh. But every other room, it was 2 hours. I would just put it in there, set the timer for 2 hours, and then leave, drive across town, load up my car with stuff that I was bringing over here anyway, and put it in the garage. They never smoked in the garage. It didn't smell like
It's so crazy. So you're probably one of the only people that I've ever heard, and probably one of the few people I'll ever hear, say that your favorite wealth building tool is your primary residence. Can you tell us a little bit? And it sounds like the reason why is because you're buying problems and you're being compensated for solving those problems. Can you go into a little bit where, because we have a lot of new listeners listening to this, where they may not want to bet their primary residence as that, because you're doing two things. You're solving a problem and you're moving all the time. Can you tell us a little bit about where people might trip over using that wealth vehicle?
You can get caught up in paying too much money, personalizing the rehab to stuff you like. Say you love the color pink, like I do, and you paint every room pink. You're going to have to find somebody who loves pink as much as you do and wants to live in a Pepto-Bismol house to buy that house. That's a very small amount of people. Unique is a 4-letter word in real estate. Unusual, funky. These are all bad words in real estate because people want normal. Everybody wants to fit in. So when you buy a weird house, you're going to have to find somebody who wants to live in a weird house. Whereas if you buy more of a cookie cutter property, you have a lot more people who would be interested in it. So don't buy a weird house and don't get caught up in making it so personal that it turns into a weird house. We've all seen those houses, right? There's one that looks like Luke Skywalker's house on Tatooine with that weird, like, Aunt Veru. You guys, have you seen Star Wars?
Yeah.
Am I nerding out too much?
No, I know what
There's
you're
a
talking
house
about.
down the street from me that looks like that. I'm like, I want to go in there to see it, but I would never buy it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. To know where to spend the money on a rehab like that. We run into that early on. My wife's a designer, so she really likes to customize or personalize things, and we've had to find that really healthy medium. And you also mentioned something really interesting, and I want to bring it up quickly because you talked about ozone, and a service could come in and give you a quote of $1,000. And you thought to yourself, well, I'm going to do a little bit of research. And you found that you could solve that problem for $80. The first time home buyer who's going to use their primary residence, either as a house hack or in the way that you're mentioning, needs to think along those lines. So my wife was at Home Depot and they're like, hey, we'll give you a $20 gift card if a water softening guy can come give you a bid. You know, an hour and a half later, we're like enthralled by this guy's presentation and how terrible our water is. and he's doing his thing, and he's like, and really, you get this and you get this, comes to a $10,000 price tag, and I was like, that's a hard no for me, but you're awesome, love you. You should, definitely be in the customer service business. And I just looked up the highest quality water filtration system I could find just for the sink part, and theirs was $3,000. That was part of the 10, and it was 200. No. It was 229 on sale for 190, and it wasn't even above like $300. And then I started pricing out the same things, the components in which they were offering, and the fact that I already have a water softener in my house that they claimed was old. And to do the exact same thing, the whole song and dance would cost me less than $650 for everything that they offered for $10,000. And I was blown away. It like changed my whole perspective. I was like, whoa, I'm always going to do research. But he almost had us. I was like, I'm liking what I'm hearing. And I know how sales works. So,
Yeah, so I had that same consultation with the same company with the same price. Shockingly, my water was terrible. Go figure. I
yeah,
think that your
weird.
water is
You
probably
can't
fine.
feed this to your
but
family.
yeah, you
You
can
don't love them.
piecemeal it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There could be lead in your water. I'm like, yeah, there's probably plastic in it too. But
So-
that's like,
Mindy, you had said, I'm going to say one real estate related thing, and we're going to go back to the second half because you said equal parts stock market. So I want to talk about that before we move on. But the last thing about real estate that I see most people make mistakes, and I actually pushed Dane on this quite a bit, was people do keeping up with the Joneses, and they're thinking about now. They don't do any delayed gratification. And when you try to buy the best thing for you or your wife or whatever it may be, because I deserve it, they don't ever think about, if I can delay gratification a little bit, then I can live like, Dave Ramsey says it, live like no one else now so I can live like someone else later. Okay, so stocks. What do you invest in, if you don't mind sharing, as far as you said, your other part of that question was your favorite wealth building vehicle?
I don't mind sharing, but please know that I am not an investment advisor, and me mentioning these stocks is not saying you should go out and invest in them. But like I said, we are long-term individual shareholders of tech stocks. We bought Google in 1998. I'm sure some of your listeners weren't even alive in 1998. That was a long time ago. But we bought it because our experience with that company was so positive. We bought Apple in 2007 when they announced the iPhone. I don't know if you remember this, but Microsoft held a funeral for the iPhone. Who wants to have everything in one device? I'm like, I don't even know how you come up with that phrasing because who doesn't have a smartphone now? Everybody has a smartphone. Or most everybody.
And Windows got out of it
flip
completely.
phones.
Microsoft, there's no Windows phones anymore, right?
There's no Windows phones anymore. I don't believe, but I don't follow tech news as closely as my husband does. And that's another thing. He wakes up and reads tech news. He doesn't read it all day long, but he has several tech sites that he goes to and reads up on everything that happened overnight. And like throughout the day, his phone will ping and he'll be like, oh, this is an interesting article. I'll read that too. He is constantly immersed in information about this one sector. If you're not willing to put in the kind of work that he does, then maybe that's not the right investment vehicle for you. He could have invested. I mean, we've had some dogs. We invested in the Sands Casino Hotel in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
They were a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but they're no longer around. So our investment went from whatever we put into there to zero. So that's a win. Woohoo. We bought Tesla in 2012.
Wow, that's foresight.
And they didn't start making money until
2019 or something.
I don't even know if they were. I don't even think they were selling cars back then. But he liked the idea. He liked the vision of this guy with the weird name, Elon Musk, and decided that he was going to put a small amount of money into Tesla. And it's the foresight that he has had that has helped us make so much money. And it's because he's invested in reading and consuming information about this sector in general and these specific stocks. He is constantly talking at me about Tesla. I don't care.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, you should be investing in either in index funds because you don't want to put the time into individual stocks, or individual stocks that you have experience or knowledge about the company.
absolutely. Warren Buffett talked a lot about that. They just never invested in things he didn't have a working knowledge of. And spending the time to educate yourself is so important in doing that. It's probably why I never really went down the stock road. I wasn't that guy who's gonna like read about certain industries or stock performance. I would be the VTXI guy. Like, hey, just put it in the big fund, because I don't have that bandwidth. And it's pretty remarkable that the foresight, like you said, your husband had, especially in the tech industry that changes overnight. Really, really cool to hear how you've done well on that side of things. It's an exciting industry. I came from tech, but also very risky in some regards. So really cool.
Yeah, it can be really risky. We didn't buy the Snapchat IPO. We didn't hold Twitter when it was swallowed up by Elon Musk. And we've got some non-traditional or non-tech stocks as well, like Costco. We love going to Costco. We have a great experience when we're there. Have you ever been to Costco on a Saturday
Crazy.
morning? You and everybody in your town is there. So they're doing a good job. They have great profit margins. They treat their employees well. Who has a bad thing to say about Costco? If you do, I don't want to hear it because I love it. And Chipotle. We like going to Chipotle. They offer a fresh, healthy-ish meal, and we would go there. We enjoy. There's always a line out the door at dinner time, at lunchtime. So we did that one too.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily do a lot of research into the company, but have a good experience with them. But again, I'm not endorsing individual stocks.
Yeah.
And Chipotle actually did fairly well recently. Or someone was telling me they had a really good uptick in some of their stock holdings. But
I want to say, is this edited? Chipotle stock split. Aren't they doing? Yeah, they're doing a 50 for 1 stock
50
split.
for 1. Man.
whoa,
So every one share of Chipotle that I own, I will, after the stock splits, after the actual day that it splits, I will now own 50 shares.
I'm going to go.
50.
If it hasn't split yet, I might buy some. 'Cause there's a historical trend
It
that
has not
usually
split
happens
yet.
with stock splits that you can get in and out, but then it's short-term capital gains after that. Okay, moving on to the next section. We have uncomfortable money questions that we like to ask.
Yeah, this is my favorite, Ramit Jr.
Dane, you want to go over the first one?
yeah. So right now, what would you say is your biggest irrational fear around money,
And why?
and why?
It's letting go of the purse strings and spending. I am a huge fan of Bill Bengen, who wrote the original 4% rule research, the safe withdrawal rate. And to anybody listening who wants to read this, I've got a copy of the original article. It's kind of difficult to find online. Email mindy@biggerpockets.com and I will send you a copy. I've got it on my computer. I've actually offered this several times, and I've probably sent this out 200 times to people who are like so excited to read this article. I know based on Bill's research, and Bill is a rocket scientist. He is so smart. I feel dumber just even talking to him. Not that he makes me feel dumb. He's just like so brilliant. He says that if you have portfolio of 60% stocks and 40% bonds, you can safely withdraw 4% the first year of your retirement and then adjust for inflation and do the same thing. You have a 96% chance of having money at year 30. So he did this for his traditional retirement clients who were looking to have money last them through their retirement. I know that I have more money than I'm ever going to spend. but I'm going to the grocery store and my daughter is with me and she's like, oh, let me go grab pretzels. I'm like, well, wait, let me go with you and make sure that there's not a cheaper option someplace else.
Right.
I can afford to spend an extra dollar on pretzels. Why can't I let go of that? And I'm trying really hard to let go of that. But that is my irrational money. I don't know. That's a fear.
Yeah.
I fear I don't want to spend too much on.
So I think
whatever.
that's the 4%
Well,
rule of thumb. Right.
yeah. Yeah.
It's
And I just wanted to add to that quickly. So J.K. Rowling, she wrote Harry Potter. She was in this scarcity mindset her entire life because she had nothing. And when she had made well over several hundred million, she remembered being in a store and she's like comparing the prices of each product. And it clicked in her mind for the first time after she was quite wealthy. She's like, I can afford both forever. And then she just started like her whole kind of life and mindset changed from there. But it was so ingrained in her. She was still comparing the regular store brand, like a Kroger version of whatever the thing was, and like, should I get this? And it was a very fascinating interview.
Yeah, that is true. I could afford both. And I'm trying really hard to get better. That was one of the big things I took away from that episode with Ramit was just like, stop obsessing about these $3 questions.
So I know that the 4% rule of thumb, I know you're like closer to 5 million, but easy math, $4 million, 4% of that is 160 grand per year. Mindy can spend 160 grand per year indefinitely, which is $13,333 a month on whatever. And 30 years from now, there's a 96% chance she's still going to be okay with it.
I'm still so Michael Kitces did this from Nerd's Eye View. He did this report. So Bill Bengen wrote it in 1994, and Michael Kitces redid the research in 2015. And he's like, not only is Bill right, but look at this. And he's got this fascinating graph on his website that shows in many cases you have significantly more money at year 30 than you did at year one. So even though you've been pulling out the entire time, your portfolio has grown so much that you have way more money in 30 years than you did when you started. And there's one case where at year 31, they ran out of money. And that was retiring into a period of high inflation, like retiring in the late 60s. And then you had the whole decade of high inflation.
It was
in the
1967, I think was the year specifically. That was like the only case. It was like 3 decades worth or something crazy like that.
It goes all the way back to the beginning of the stock market in the 1900s, this research. And the early
So you're saying
1900s.
beers
And,
are on
yeah,
you
it's
next time we see
fascinating.
each other.
Beers are on me.
Your daughter gets the pretzels. Yeah.
Okay, next
That's great.
uncomfortable money question. We only have 2. If you, God forbid, if you got into an accident of some kind, you couldn't work, maybe you're in a coma or something, how long could you or your business or your family make it?
Forever. Indefinitely. We are, because we only spend, you said I could spend 160. I spend about 60.
Right. 160 a year indefinitely for basically forever.
Yeah. According to
And,
Bill,
and I just
and
want
I
to
believe
point
Bill.
out, I want to point out how remarkable that is, especially coming from where you had come from. And it, like for me personally, gives me a lot of hope that, hey, if you keep your eye on the ball, there is a place that you can arrive and feel like you're able to say yes to a question like that. It's amazing. And I feel like a lot of listeners, I would be one of those who'd be listening to this and be like, how is that even possible? I'm a server right now, or I work for Apple as the tech geek guy or whatever it is, where you have an everyday job, but yet there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I just love that you were able to say, yes, I'd be okay. And that's really cool because you're an everyday person who's made it something remarkable.
Yeah, we started.
Yeah. And that,
Go ahead.
that comes from consistently investing in the stock market and consistently investing in real estate over the last 20 to 23 years. So we've been investing in actually longer than that, because that was when did Google IPO? 1998, I think. So that's even longer than 22 years, maybe 25, 26 years. But anyway, you can edit that out. That was stupid. But consistently investing is not, investing $5 that I have left over. It is, I am going to make an investment plan. I am going to invest $100 a week or $1,000 a week or whatever you're investing, $10 a week. Consistently, you put that money in the stock market, in your investments first, and then you spend. You max out your Roth IRA, and then you take a vacation. We do these things consistently. I'm still investing now more to reduce my taxable income, which is for the 401k. But I'm still investing even today, even though I already have more money than I could ever use. Now I'm building generational wealth for my kids to be able to do whatever they want, but not nothing.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Not nothing. It's a great point.
Well, Mindy, what is one actionable step that a listener can take, action on immediately to get them closer to the goal of financial independence or start turning the ship around?
You need to know how much money you're spending. And if you don't know how much you're spending, you're going to spend it all. So you should start tracking your expenses right now. And once you start tracking your expenses, you will start to notice patterns that can be changed. And I'm doing this thing for $5 a day. $5 a day might not derail your entire budget, but $5 a day put into the stock market will absolutely make your retirement. So start off with tracking your expenses, seeing what you can cut out that is frivolous. You're not getting any value out of it. You're doing it out of habit, not enjoyment, and remove it. See what happens. If you don't miss it, fabulous. Take that money and start investing. Use that as your nest egg to start, or your foundation to start investing. And if you discover that you have cut something out that you miss, put it back in. Now you know that that's something that brings you joy or value or whatever, and you can keep that while you're looking for something else to cut. Get a roommate. If you don't have a roommate, get a roommate. If you have a roommate and an extra room anyway, get another roommate. Look for ways to reduce your expenses that don't actually affect your everyday life. Like having a roommate, actually that would affect your everyday life. But okay, look for ways to reduce your expenses that, what's a great way to say this? That you can live with. If you can open up a credit card because you have great credit, not because you're in massive debt. You open up a credit card that offers 50,000 airline miles if you spend $3,000 in the first 3 months, and you're able to spend $3,000 in the first 3 months. Now you have 50,000 airplane miles. Now your world kind of opens up. Oh, I can go travel. Well, where are you going to stay? Oh, you need a hotel. Open up a hotel card. Your regular spending is now earning you vacations instead of you paying cash for everything. Now, I caution, if you are in debt, this is not the time to start opening up credit cards to get the points. You need to first pay off your credit card debt, and then you can start using credit cards effectively. But that's called travel hacking. There's lots of websites that talk about the different ways and the different cards you can use. You will need good credit to do that. So go to Credit Karma or Free Credit Report. Is it Free Credit Report?
I think so. Yeah.
What's the annualcreditreport.com? Free Credit Report, actually, I think they charge you. Annualcreditreport.com gives you one free report per credit reporting bureau every year.
That's awesome. And these are really great, straightforward, actionable steps. I love that you mentioned tracking. On a previous episode, we were really diving into that is almost the fundamental pre-step to budgeting or finances of any kind. And so just really quickly, do you have a tracking tool that you use? Mine's kind of built into my bank. So we kind of like to give people some pro tips on that as well.
So my friends have a website called wafflesonwednesday.com, and it is sporadically down, but I had I had my friend, Mr. Waffles on Wednesday, recreate his spending tracker for me. It's essentially a Google form that goes on the front page of my phone. And every time I spend money, I type it in there and it goes to a Google sheet that I can then use to keep track of where I'm spending in each category. If you go to biggerpockets.com/Mindy's budget, you can see what I'm talking about. It's super easy it was super easy for me because he set it all up for me. But I'm not good with computers. If you are good with spreadsheets, that's an awesome way. I was looking for something that I could put on my phone and customize to my own categories. I have a ton of categories on there because I wanted to be able to track where my money was going. If I needed to cut something out, I can cut out alcohol super quick. I don't need alcohol to live, as opposed to food and shelter. Like, you need those. I could cut out backyard parties if something happened and all of a sudden we were in a pinch and needed to be able to pull that out. I was also doing that publicly. So I was showing people that you can have as many categories as you want to have. But that one is awesome because you do it. It's totally customizable to everything you want, and you can see it in real time.
And that's a spreadsheet that you use.
That's awesome.
That's just a spreadsheet. But yeah, go to biggerpockets.com/Mindy's budget to check that out. It's
We're going to have all these
detailed.
links below
You
in the
can see-
description as well, so you guys can link directly to them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
one
you.
I'm going to check out. That's awesome. I love that because it's right in front of you. Where I get mixed up is I rely on me and my wife's money dates once a week to go over the finances, which is a huge improvement from what we were doing, which is nothing. And then I'm like, but to be able to see it every day and type it in, I know she would love me a lot more. So Mindy, you may have just like earned me huge brownie points.
Oh, you're welcome. You could just go ahead and take all of the credit for that. Tell your wife, look at what I made.
you.
But I like it because it's on your phone. Where are you spending money? Out of the house. So when I first started tracking my spending, I had a spiral notebook on the countertop where I would park in the garage and open the door, and that's the first thing that I would see. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have to track my expenses. Let me write down all the things that I did. 2 weeks in, I'm like, why do I go to the grocery store literally every day?
Right. No,
I was going there because I would go to the gym, and then on the way home, I would stop at the grocery store for one thing or two things. And you leave with 10 or 15, which is no big deal if you're going to the grocery store, once a month. But when you're going every day, now you have all this garbage that you don't need. I was just going for one thing.
yeah, it's crazy.
Also, I need to make one correction. I said we bought Google in 1998. That's probably when Carl, my husband, first came across it, but they didn't IPO until 2004. So that's when we bought it. I didn't have super access in 98.
That's I know we're in a weird finance place because the go-to was, oh, Mint. Everybody should track everything on Mint. It does it all for you. And as of this recording right now, like 3 days ago, Mint shut down. So everyone's like migrating. No one knows where to go. There's like 4 or 5 competitors. There's no clear winner just yet. So we're going to be watching that closely. But I think I historically was a spreadsheet guy before too.
Yeah, not me. I hate spreadsheets. But I really, again, love the actionable tips. And these are things that even I have been able to take away. And I know I'm just going to make my process a little bit easier because those are the small things done consistently that really get you to a great place where you can say, hey, I'm good. I can survive if I get in an accident tomorrow. Really great place to be. But I would say, Hugh, was there any other things we were going to dive into specifically? I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and I don't want to capitalize on all your time, Mindy. This has been a great interview, and it's just been so nice to getting to know you outside of just the money finance personality, just Mindy, also the waitress or the everyday person who grew up in a frugal family. That was really cool.
Where can listeners find out more about you?
I am on Bigger Pockets Money. I am all over social media at Mindy at BP. That's MINDYATBP for Bigger Pockets. You can find me Tuesdays and Fridays on your favorite podcast player with the Bigger Pockets Money podcast. And on Wednesdays, you can find me on mindyonmoney.com.
Awesome. Any last things for our guests or
Very
listeners?
cool.
You can do this. Money is not hard. It just takes a little bit of work and a little bit of knowledge. All the information you need is on the internet in a variety of places. There are bloggers and podcasters that speak your language. So do not hesitate to get started.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to, Mindy on money. That's really cool. I'm going to have my wife tune in. So I love that you're starting kind of moving down your own path in that. And thanks for the great content. And then again, just really good advice for everyday people to get
You
started.
can also check out mindyonmoney.com/cybermindy for a very interesting webpage. So
Now I got to go to that. What does that look like?
Now I'm worried. What is that?
I don't know. It's in her podcast. You'll have to find out by listening. I think it's episode like 4 or something for Mindy on Money.
Did he put a hyphen in there?
No, there's nothing there.
Ah, the page you're looking
But there
for
might
doesn't
be by the
exist.
time you get here, by the time our listeners
Yeah.
listen. No, thanks for being on the show,
Hugh.
and we hope to have you back in the future because when we get into right now we're doing the basics at the very beginning. We're going to be getting into the tactics and the crazy stuff and the, mega backdoor Roth, all the cool, the sexy stuff, if you will, if you can call finance sexy. And so much more. We love that you were able to come on and share a little bit about your past with us. And thanks so much for adding value to us.
Dane, Hugh, thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. And yeah, I will come back and talk about anything you want.
Woo!